What's up, perps? I think that's how I'm going to start these things from now on. It's normally how I jump into a chat when I'm talking to everybody. My initial first thing is, what's going on, perps? Or what up, perps? Well, fits with everything going on right now. My last video was that gun trafficking video. And in there it started to talk about domestic violence, or domestic terrorists. I'm sorry, there's been so many domestic violence bills that I'm getting confused on stuff. Now, these bills, I'm going to cover two, and I'm going to do them back to back. I was going to do them together, but I think I'm going to split them up. So, these bills go into domestic terrorism. If you know anything about, say, organizations like the Proud Boys, anything about the Boogaloo, there are a couple others, the Three Percenters. The government really wants to classify all these guys as white supremacists and terrorists, even though they're not. If you don't know anything about the Proud Boys, they were an organization that started out on college campuses to basically stand up to the Antifa types that were trying to shut down right-wing speakers. That's where they came from. They're not a racist organization. They have plenty of members that are different colors, different religions. Doesn't matter. It's just an all-male organization when it comes to the Proud Boys. But any of the media coverage in the last little while just tries to demonize the hell out of them. They use the same arguments with January 6th, calling it a right-wing, racist, terrorist attack on the Capitol. These people are full of shit. I was trying to think. There was another one that they really tried pushing the whole white supremacist angle with. The VCLD rally day in 2018. They tried to say that was going to be a white supremacist event, and it was going to try to kick off a race war, saying white supremacists were going to be in attendance. There were, I think, 3 or 4 guys that they were watching, and they knew those guys weren't anywhere near the rally, but they kept pushing that narrative. Matter of fact, in the ghost gun hearings that I covered, they pushed that same narrative. So pay attention to this, especially this white supremacist neo-Nazi crap. Because really and truly in the United States right now, there aren't enough white supremacists in this country relatively to fill up a fucking Waffle House. We pretty much have made fun of those idiots so damn bad that they won't even come out of their closets. So, all right, let's get into this bill. Let me go and do the normal screen share. Ooh, hit the wrong button. And we're going to share it with sound because I'm going to crank my man back up while we look at this bill. Let me see. I can't remember which song I was playing last time. We're going to roll with this one. Okay, let's see. This is the document I'm looking for. Let me roll back up to the top. Okay, so this was placed on the calendar on 3/25 of 2021. It was introduced sooner than that. This is when it was actually placed on the calendar. To authorize dedicated domestic terrorism offices within the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigations to analyze, monitor domestic terrorist activities, and require the federal government to take steps to prevent domestic terrorism and for other purposes. Now, understand when they are talking about domestic terrorism, they could be talking about anybody who disagrees with the left's agenda in the United States right now. That's simply all you have to do is just disagree with the left. Your social media, your Instagram, your Facebook, all that, YouTube, if you're on YouTube, all that is going to be monitored. It's going to be looked at. If you don't believe me, they've been doing it to the military for a long time, especially after January 6th. Anybody who had anything like the Gadsden flag on a profile or something like that, they've been putting guys like that out of the military. A lot of it's been happening kind of quietly, but yeah, that stuff's been happening. And there are a couple other bills that mention veterans specifically as being probable white supremacists, what the hell ever's. Okay, let's see. So this was introduced by Mr. Dick Durbin, and yes, it's Dick Durbin. For himself, Miss Hirono of Hawaii, who is an absolute moron. Duckworth, well, she's not necessarily the brightest bulb on that tree either. Introduced the following, which was read the first time. I think this bill has been read a second time now, meaning it's moving through the Senate. Yeah, I read the second time and placed on the calendar. That was on the 25th. So it was introduced before the 25th. It was read the second time on the 25th and then placed on the calendar. So this legislation is moving through. And we already read this part, and they get back into it. To authorize dedicated domestic terrorism offices within Homeland Security, Department of Justice, the FBI, like they haven't lied about anything lately. And this is the part that really bothers me, to monitor domestic terrorist activity, because they are going to define the domestic terrorists. Now, let's look at this. I was going to wait till later, but we're going to do it now. So, in the Senate, these are the people who would be basically defining who is a domestic terrorist or not. I don't trust Marco Rubio worth a shit, even though he's a Republican. Mark Warner, another moron. Dianne Feinstein. This is a chick who traveled around with a Chinese spy for like 20 years or some shit for her driver. If you don't believe me, the news stories on that are out there. It even got published by some big CNN what the hell evers. Of course, they blew the story off, but they at least reported on it. Ron Wyden. This guy is an absolute mental midget. I could imagine a game of him and Hank Johnson playing checkers. It would look like two chimpanzees trying to solve a physics problem. Mark Heinrich. I don't know a whole hell of a lot about him. I've seen him on some things. He's another complete anti-gun moron. Angus King. I don't know a lot about him. Don't know a lot about Bennett. I've seen him in hearings, and the questions they ask and the agendas they push are exactly the huge leftist agendas. Ben Sass, John Cornyn, Tom Cotton. Those guys are pretty good. Roy Blunt, he could go either way. Susan Collins, not huge on her. Idaho, I don't know much about him. And Richard Burr from North Carolina is another just weak sauce milquetoast. I haven't seen anything out of them that impresses me. So that's the Senate side, but this bill actually mentions the House. So, if you're familiar with any of these idiots, you know how dangerous this bill could actually be. Adam Schiff, like that little pencil neck joker, has not lied through his teeth on national TV and in congressional hearings and never been called on it. Jim Hines, don't know a lot about him. Andrew Carson, I've heard him speak. He's another one just pushing the leftist agenda like it's, I don't know. Jackie Spear, she's an absolute idiot. Mike Quigley, don't know much about him. Eric Swalwell, he's on here. You guys are getting the point, man. Val Demings, she's a fucking piece of work, to say the least. These are the people that will decide whether you are a terrorist or not. Because maybe you have some social media posts that they don't like. And that's all it will have. That's all it will take. We already live in a state, if you don't realize, the NSA captures every communication out there. If it's an electronic communication, the NSA is trapping it. And that information can be used in plenty of backdoor ways. So, let's look at that. But let's look at this guy first. This is our Sons of Liberty. That's the cut for this bill, because we're all going to be domestic terrorists if we, disagree with our rulers these days. So it is what it is. Okay, the term director of FBI, domestic terror has the meaning given in the term in section 2331 of 18 USC. I didn't pull that up. Much like the definition of a machine gun, they're going to interpret it any way they want. So it is what it is. Foreign person or organization designated as a foreign terrorist organization under section 219 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. An individual organization designated under Executive Order 13224. I didn't pull that up. Man, this stuff is just driving me nuts. A state sponsor of terrorism as determined by the Secretary of State under Section 6J of the Export Administration Act of 79, Section 40, Arms Export Control Act, or Section 620 of Foreign Assistance Act. The term domestic terrorism executive committee means the committee within the Department of Justice tasked with assessing, sharing information about ongoing domestic terrorism threats. The term hate crime incident, and that is a definition that they absolutely blow out of the water, means an act described in section 241, 245, 247, 249, Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 901 of the Civil Rights Act of 68. The term secretary means the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the term uniformed services has the meaning given the term in Section 101A of Title 10 United States Code. Offices to combat terrorism. So, let me get that out of the way. Domestic terrorism, or authorization of offices to monitor, analyze, investigate, and prosecute domestic terrorism. So again, we're back to the monitoring. Domestic terrorism unit. There's an authorized domestic terrorism unit in the Office of Intelligence and Analysis, Department of Homeland Security, which shall be responsible for monitoring and analyzing domestic terrorism. Here we go with the monitoring again. Domestic Terrorism Office. There's authorized a Domestic Terrorism Office in the Counterterrorism Section, National Security Division of the Department of Justice, which shall be responsible for investigating, prosecuting incidents of domestic terrorism, and which shall be headed by the Domestic Terrorism Council. Domestic Terrorism Section of the FBI, like they haven't lied about who is domestic terrorist. There's authorized a domestic terrorism section in the Counterterrorism Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which shall be responsible for investigating domestic terrorism activities. Staffing. The Secretary and Attorney General and the Director shall each ensure each office authorized under this section in their respective agencies shall... Why am I getting all these messages? Okay, it's my wife telling me she's got to do something. So, they got to say they have adequate number of employees to perform required duties. They want to expand their budgets, and they want to expand the number of people that they're going to have out there monitoring every single electronic communication that goes anywhere inside the United States. Have not less than one employee dedicated to ensuring compliance with civil rights and civil liberties laws and regulations. What they are going to do with that person is try to find every single way to justify their spying, their monitoring, and their data collection. That's what that person's going to be there for. require that all employees undergo anti-bias training. Okay. All right. Moving on. Sunset. This shall terminate 10 years after the date of enactment of this act. Yeah, right. You know good and well they're going to keep this running. Biannual report required, not less than 180 days, enactment of this act, 6 months thereafter, for the 10-year period. Secretary of Homeland Security, Attorney General, Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation shall submit a joint report authored by the Domestic Terrorism Offices authorized under paragraphs 1, 2, 3 of subsection A. 2. The Committee on the Judiciary, the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, and the Select Committee on Intelligence of the Senate. That's the idiots I showed you a minute ago. Dianne Feinstein, Ron Wyden. That's who's going to be doing this. The Committee on the Judiciary for Homeland Security, Select Committee of Intelligence, and the House of Representatives. That was Swalwell, Schiff. Those idiots. Oh, here's where we get into this crap. An assessment of domestic terrorism threat posed by white supremacists and neo-Nazis, including white supremacists and neo-Nazis of federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies and uniformed services. So, yeah, again, they want to look through every police force. They want to look all through the military. That's monitoring for any white supremacist activity. So post a meme, see what happens. Be anti-government, see what happens. All right, B. In the first report, an analysis on incidents or attempted incidents of domestic terrorism that have occurred in the United States since April 19, 1995, including any white supremacist related incidents or attempted incidents. White supremacists, white supremacists, white supremacists. In each subsequent report, an analysis of incidents or attempted incidents of domestic terrorism that occurred in the United States during the preceding 6 months, including any white supremacist related incidents or attempted incidents, and a quantitative analysis of domestic terrorism for the preceding 6 months, including the number of domestic terrorism assessments initiated by the Federal Bureau of Intimidation, including the number of assessments for each classification and subcategory with a specific classification on or subcategory for white supremacists. They gotta keep this fucking race shit up. They have to push it. It's nothing but it's that narrative. Hey, if people buy into this, we can get more power. We can do more spying. We can go after these people that disagree with the government. That's what this is going to be. Like I said, the Proud Boys, they try to classify them as a bunch of white supremacists, and they're not. They're people of every race in there, people of every religion. So the guy running the show for a while, say what you want, whether he was really an FBI informant and all that, he was half black and half Cuban, running the Proud Boys. Just people who buy this narrative, you're unfixable. Okay, domestic terrorism related preliminary investigations initiated by the Federal Bureau of Investigations, including the number of preliminary investigations from each classification and subcategory with a specific classification or subcategory for those related to white supremacy. I can't speak. You guys get the point. How many preliminary investigations resulted from assessments? Number 3, domestic terrorism related full investigation initiated by the Federal Bureau of Intimidation. Again, with a specific classification for white supremacy. Notice how they don't mention any other group in the United States that's anti-government or a racist group. And there are plenty out there. There are plenty out there from every single color. But they're going to focus on this one. And there's literally a lady, not a couple years ago. She took bacon and hung it on the doorknobs of a mosque. Dick move. Do I believe it should have cost her a hate crime and a couple of years in prison? No, I don't. What, baby?
I'm rewarding Bubby with this because I love him.
Alright, well, go take it to him.
Yes, sir. We can take care.
Yeah, she literally got, I don't know, a few years in prison, charged with a hate crime for just a dick move. So, yeah, if you don't think that they will go after someone for something stupid or your social media they just don't like, you're freaking so wrong. It's not even funny. All right. Let's see. We went through 3. For domestic terrorism related incidents, including number of incidents from each classification and subcategory with a specific classification or subcategory for those related to white supremacism. Number of deaths and injuries resulting from each incident and detailed explanation of the incident. Now, in Atlanta, there was a guy, 2 years ago now, went into 2 massage parlors and shot the people in the massage parlors. Mainly women from parts of Asia. I can't remember their exact lineage. They try to blame that on this white supremacist shit. What it really came down to is this guy had a sex addiction. He was going to these places and getting his little happy endings with his massage, and blamed them for his addiction to that and went in and shot them. Had nothing to do with race whatsoever. But the media, the government, the Justice Department all tried to make that about race, even though the investigation pointed completely away from race being an issue. They have to push the narrative. Domestic terrorism related, I already read that one. 5, federal domestic terrorism related arrests, including the number of arrests from each classification subcategory, specific focus on white supremacism. Boy, they love that word. All right, federal domestic terrorism related incidents, including number of indictments for each classification subcategory, white supremacism. Federal domestic terrorism related prosecutions, again, classification, subcategory, specific focus, white supremacy. Federal domestic terrorism related convictions, same thing, focus on white supremacism. Federal related weapons recoveries, including the number of each type of weapon, the number of weapons from each classification and subcategory with a specific classification or subcategory for those related to white supremacism. If you watch that hearing on ghost guns, they're pushing that white supremacist narrative in there hard. Even in news conferences lately with the Democrat members of Congress, they push the white supremacism along with the polymer 80 guns hard. This all ties in. An explanation of each individual case that progressed through more than one stage, including specific classification or subcategory. Identifying personal information not otherwise releasable to the public. Okay, they get into hate crimes here. Again, the definition of hate crimes in the last, I want to say 8 years or so, has been expanded. And much like the guy who went in and shot up the massage parlors, they want to push a hate crime for that, even though that had nothing to do with race. The reason I mention that is they talk about the rise in hate crimes, and there hasn't really been too much of a rise in hate crimes. They just changed the definition to be more expansive so that they can say there has been a huge rise in it. Now, one of the ways there has been a rise in hate crimes is attacks on Asian people since COVID. The vast majority of those attacks are done by people who are not white. La da da da. Facts matter, kids. When you're looking at something, then they only give you one side of a data set, and they don't give you the other side of a data set. You have to ask yourself, what are they hiding? And they are hiding a lot. It's like with COVID. They gave you the number of cases, they gave you the number of deaths. That little ticker ran on the bottom of the news constantly. They did not give you the number of recoveries. So someone like me looked at those numbers, did a little addition and subtraction, and came out with, wow, more people are recovering from this than are dying from this. In fact, the vast majority of people have been recovering from it. That is CDC numbers, YouTube. Let's see. Classification and public release. Each report submitted under paragraph 1 shall be unclassified to the greatest extent possible. You know they are going to black that shit out. With a classified annex only if necessary. I guarantee you what they will do in this when they're looking at hate crimes. They will black out anything that comes from someone who is not white and will only release the numbers if that person can be classified as white. That's what they do. That's what they've always done. In the case of unclassified portion of a report posted to the public websites, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Intimidation, they have to produce these numbers every year anyway. It's the Unified Crime Statistics Report every year, which they lag on that shit, but they're supposed to do it every year. Non-duplications basically states that if two agencies are overlapping in a very significant way, that they both come together and write the report together is what that is talking about. Why we have so many agencies that would overlap just goes to show you we have too many alphabet agencies. Domestic Terrorism Executive Committee. There's authorized a Domestic Terrorism Executive Committee which shall meet on a regular basis, not less regularly than 4 times a year, so they got to meet at least quarterly, to coordinate with the United States attorneys and other key public safety officials across the country to promote information sharing and ensure an effective response and organized joint effort to combat domestic terrorism. Again, 3%ers, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers. Get ready, guys, because if this passes, they're going to be in your back pocket even more than they are now. To be co-chaired by Domestic Terrorism Council, authorized by subsection A to B, United States Attorney or Assistant United States Attorney, member of the National Security Division of the Department of Justice, and a member of the Federal Bureau of Intimidation. Focus on greatest threats. Let's see. Terrorism authors, subsection. Focus their limited resources. Yeah, limited my ass. On the most significant domestic terrorism threats, as determined by the number of domestic terrorism related incidents from each category and subclassification, and the joint report for the preceding 6 months under subsection B. You know, the biggest... I won't even go into that. It just... They're trying to treat this like there's some terrorist attack every single minute from some white supremacist. And that shit ain't happening. Even McVeigh, who blew up a damn federal building, I don't think he had anything to do with white supremacists. He just hated the damn government. And if the government ever has to ask why someone would hate them so bad, their lack of self-reflection in this is astounding. Required training and resources. Attorney General Director review anti-terrorism training resources, other prospective agencies to provide federal, state, local, tribal, and enforcement agencies, including state and local anti-terrorism program that is funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance of the Department of Justice. More money, more appropriations. And ensure that such programs include training and resources to assist state, local, tribal enforcement agencies in understanding, directing, deterring, and investigating acts of domestic terrorism and white supremacist neo-Nazi infiltration of law enforcement and corrections agencies. The domestic terrorism training shall focus on the most significant domestic terrorism threats as determined by the quantitative analysis of joint report required under Section 3B. Requirement. Any individual who provides domestic terrorism training required under the section shall have expertise in domestic terrorism and relevant academic, that's funny, law enforcement or other community-based experience in matters related to domestic terrorism.
Dad, can we put my robot up that I got for Christmas?
We'll see, Monkey. Let me finish what I'm doing. Alright, relevant, okay, report, not less than 6 months. This basically goes after the same thing. Quarterly meetings, all that. Classification and public release, unclassified to the greatest extent. Already hit that. Let's see. Not later than 180 days after the date of enactment of this act, the Attorney General and the Director of the Secretary of Defense shall establish a interagency task force to analyze and combat white supremacist and neo-Nazi infiltration of the uniformed services of the federal enforcement agencies. This isn't going to be used to go after just white supremacists, folks. It's not. In general, not later than 1 year after the interagency task force is established. Joint report on the findings of the task force, Attorney General, and the Secretary of Defense. To such findings to the Committee of the Judiciary in the Senate, Homeland Security, Governmental Affairs, Select Committee on Intelligence in the Senate. That is hysterical that those people are actually mentioned in the same sentence as intelligence. Committee of the Armed Forces of the Senate, Committee of the Judiciary of the House of Representatives, Homeland Security, House of Representatives, Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence of the House of Representatives. Again, it's funny, those people are mentioned in the same sentence with intelligence because they have a very large lack of intelligence. Committee on Armed Services of the House of Representatives. Doesn't Hank Johnson serve on that? You know, he thought the island of Guam was going to tip over if we put more Marines on it. Like the island of Guam is just bobbing out in the ocean. Classification and public release. They pretty much go over the same thing. What can be classified, what's not. Case of unclassified portion. Posted on the websites, Department of Justice. Of course, they have to report crime statistics on those sites. Support for hate crime incidents with a nexus to domestic terrorism. Community Relations Services. Community Relations Services of the Department of Justice, authorized by Civil Rights Act, may offer support of the service to communities where the Department of Justice has brought charges in hate crime incident that has a nexus to domestic terrorism. Much again, like old buddy who shot up the parlors, that wasn't a race incident. They're calling a race incident. They will try to attach that to domestic terrorism. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Section 924, Title 18, United States Code is amended by adding the following. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Attorney General, acting through the Director of the Federal Bureau of Intimidation, shall assign special agent or hate crimes liaison to each field office of the Bureau of Intimidation to investigate hate crimes incidents with a nexus to domestic terrorism, such as defined, yada, yada, yada. Review of COVID-19 hate crimes. Boy, they're not later than 14 days after the enactment of this act, the Attorney General shall designate an officer or employee of the Department of Justice whose sole responsibility during the applicable period shall be to facilitate the expedited review of COVID-19 hate crimes and reports of any such crime to federal, state, local law enforcement agencies. All right, look at this. Not too long back, probably about a year or so, on camera, there was a black guy that beat the ever-living hell out of an Asian woman in New York. The DA in New York, even though there was evidence, video evidence of this guy doing it, let this guy loose because he didn't want to admit or didn't want to have to try to charge this guy with a hate crime, even though he said he beat her because she was Asian. Controlling the narrative. I don't. People are just so freaking blind. They're such sheep. They don't see this stuff. Of course, not a lot of people are going to sit around and watch congressional hearings or live streams like I do or read laws like I do. I wish to God more people would. But most people are headline readers. Applicable period. Beginning on the date of enactment, 1 year after the date on which the emergency period described in subparagraph B of section of the Social Security Act ends, except that the Attorney General may extend such period as appropriate. First of all, why is hate crimes getting mentioned in a Social Security Act? Second of all, the Attorney General can extend this indefinitely. COVID-19 hate crimes. Term COVID-19 hate crime means a crime of violence, such as defined, and their definition of violence is very wide, that is motivated by the actual or perceived ethnicity, age, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability of any person, and the actual or perceived relationship to the spread of COVID-19 of any person because of characteristics described in A above. Guidance for law enforcement agencies. They are going to tell law enforcement agents how they want these law enforcement agencies to handle these things. They're going to establish online reporting of incidents, expand culturally competent, linguistically appropriate public education campaigns, and collection of data and public reporting of hate crimes. Guidance relating to COVID-19 pandemic, the Attorney General and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, in coordination with COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force and community-based organizations, shall issue guidance describing best practices to mitigate racially discriminatory language in describing the COVID-19 pandemic. Control the language, control the narrative. Don't be guilty of old speak. Authorization of appropriations. And this kills me right here. There are authorized to be appropriated to the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Intimidation, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Defense such sums as may be necessary to carry out this act. So they're giving him a blank check to spend money like a drunken sailor, going after something that is such a minute part of American society that most of us will never run into a actual white supremacist in our lifetime. Will you run into some bigoted ass people? Yes, I've run into bigoted people from every single race. Every one. They're there. So what? Let them be a bigot. Let them talk all they want. Let them scream it from the mountain. That way you know who they are. You can either try to change their mind with rational arguments, or if they're screaming from the mountaintop and their mind can't be changed, at least you know where the idiot's at and you can avoid it. Alright, kids, I'm done with this one. Y'all be cool, and I'm going to try to film another one here in just a little bit. Later.